All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Alex Gonzalez. I'm one of the two Adobe evangelists here at the U of A. Brian is here with us as well. And this is going to be fun because he's going to do part of this workshop with me too, which will be great. And I'll have good company. So today's workshop is about making icons in Adobe Illustrator. And I did start the recording. So let's go ahead and jump into it here. What we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about what Illustrator is, what icons are, and then we're going to make icons 3 different ways, just using the Pathfinder and Shapebuilder. We're going to use the pencil tool and the pen tool a little bit and the knife. And then we're going to use image trace, which is going to be when we party with Brian. And what we're trying to do is just kind of demystify the process, see how accessible it can be, and to kind of help you visualize the idea for icons. As usual, if you've got any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat or even unmute yourself. Brian and I will be ready to answer them to the best of our ability. Okay, so Adobe Illustrator is a vector-based program, and that means that everything you design with its tools can be infinitely scaled. That means you can make it smaller or bigger without ending up with jagged edges or a loss of quality. This works for these flat kind of images that don't have a real gradation to them, although you can put gradients. So a vector image can go from 100% to 300% and maintain its smooth curvature. Whereas what we call a raster image, it's an image made up of basically pixels, most photographs that we see. If you enlarge it beyond 100%, the program has to do what's called interpolate or create additional pixels. And that's why we end up with these jaggies, these jagged edges. So that's why you want to make designs in Illustrator instead of drawing them in a pixel-based program, because you can make them bigger or smaller and make the highest quality work, and you can refine it at any time as well. So just a tiny little plug about vector versus rasters. So we're going to be working mostly vector, but when we talk about image tracing, we're going to use raster images and turn them into vectors, which is fun to know. All right, and then what are icons? We're all highly familiar with icons. Icons are visual representations of a feature, a program, or file. Especially with our smartphones nowadays, there's kind of universal symbols for save and share and new tab, anything like that. But they can also be specific to your brand, and they're a design element as well. So there's the kind of vanilla icons that we're used to, but then there's the idea of developing icons that go along with your logo, your identity, and that have a mood and story. So these are some icons. I recognize the one on the right looks like Angry Birds. And icons have also become how we view apps on our phones. And often they're just a simplified version of the logo. But there are 7 rules for the most successful icons. And the short of it is you want to make icons that are consistent. So when you create a set, they should look like they belong together, that they are short and to the point. That's brevity. Can they communicate their message cleanly and quickly? So for example, the controller here, this clearly tells us it's a controller without having all the additional buttons and joysticks and the cable. So you want to simplify, and that goes along with readability and ease of use. Really strong icons can cross language and cultural barriers because they rely on visual more than anything. And then personality, does it go along with your brand? Do they have a unique style to them that kind of represents who you or your business is? Okay, so what we're going to do is start with a fresh document. So enough with this page here. And we're just gonna, if you open up Illustrator, it should give you the splash page. I already have a couple of things open, but let's go File, New. And we're just gonna make it 1000 by 1000 pixels. Generally speaking, icons are designed on a square. They're usually used online and in applications in 24 by 24 pixels up to 1024 by 1024. I just went with 1000 because it's an easy number to say and enter. All right. And then what I did is take the I think mine's on my desktop. Yeah. So from your assets, we're going to create these icons together first using, oh, yes. Brian, would you mind sharing the resource link again so that people can download the assets? A few people just joined. Of course. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to recreate these icons, and these are pretty familiar icons to us. I would say this is search a page, create a new file, save or like something, send an email, make a new email, check email, kind of depends on what application you're in, edit or compose, next, and settings, right? So I like to just drop this in my artboard just by clicking and dragging. And couple keyboard shortcuts. I use Command or Control minus, Command or Control plus to zoom in and out. I use spacebar to pan around my document. And it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to lock this element. So I'm going to go to layers, open my layers, and just lock it. That way I can't grab it and move it and select it by mistake. So I was on the selection tool and I just moved it outside of my artboard and I held shift and made it a little smaller, a little bigger for me. And then I opened up my layers and I clicked the box next to the eye to lock it. All right, so before we jump into those, we're going to talk about Shapebuilder and Pathfinder. They do the same thing for the most part, just a little bit differently. And there are certain times when one is faster or easier than the other. It really is user's choice. I find myself jumping in and out of both of them, and I'll give you guys a pretty good example of why I might use one over the other. So let's talk about Shapebuilder really quick. If I grab my ellipse tool, which is keyboard shortcut L, and I draw a perfect circle by holding shift and dragging. Let's give it a different fill here. I don't know. It doesn't matter what you choose for fill. And I'm going to give it a stroke of 0. So I have one shape right now. And if I wanted to make a donut, what I want to do is cut the center of this out. So if I draw another circle, so I'm going to hold shift. And here's another little tip. As you hold shift and you're clicking and dragging, if you don't like the location of this as you're drawing it, you can hold spacebar and move it right to that center and then let go of spacebar. And now I'll let go of my click. So if we visualize this, let's go ahead and grab our selection tool, V on the keyboard, select both of them by clicking and dragging. We can see two separate objects, the smaller one on top of it. And we can see the hole in the center that would be created if I could somehow punch it out of the larger ellipse. And there's two ways to do that. Let's go ahead and do it with the Shapebuilder first. The Shapebuilder, I always lose it. I don't know why. The keyboard shortcut is Shift M. There it is. I think it was hiding under something. And you'll see two circles with dotted lines going through them. And the way this works is if you have to have whatever objects you're trying to combine or use to delete from one another selected. So make sure you select your two shapes first. And the way it works is if you just click on something, it's going to combine them. And now I just have one circle again. Well, I clicked and dragged. But let's say we want to remove this. So if I hold Option, if you look at my cursor, it has a minus next to it. Now what I'm doing is saying, remove this and create a new shape by removing it from these two shapes that are on top of each other. So if I hold Option and click on the center, I end up with, I'll call it a donut because I love donuts. If I use the Pathfinder instead, which is here in my properties panel, by the way, if you don't see the same layout as me, you can go to Window, Workspace, Essentials, Classic. I always forget to do that first. We want to be on the same layout to make life easier. You'll see we have Click to Unite, which is what the Shapebuilder tool does by default. When it's just set to the plus mode, it unites our shapes. And then we have minus front, which is what happens when I held Option. So if I click this minus front, it'll take the shape that's in front of the back shape and cut it out to create a new shape. So it's the same steps, right? So I could hold Option and click, or I could do minus front. And let's just talk about uniting. So if I take this circle and I want to, I don't know what to call this shape. Let's say I want to make a kind of bean shape. I can unite these. I select them both. I grab the shape builder and I click and drag across the shapes I want to become one new shape. And now this is one bean. It kind of looks like those dog treats actually. Or I could use Pathfinder and unite. It does the same thing. The final thing I want to show you is Cutout, and then we're going to use all of these in action to create those icons. So if a couple of them were a little muddy, don't worry, they'll get clear. So let's Command or Control Z to undo. If we look at this overlap here, I can hold Option and use it to cut a piece out of this circle. And then I can hold Option and click on this too. And there's my final shape. And that's the same idea as doing minus front. But Pathfinder also has another option, which is intersect. And if you look at this visual, it's showing two squares and it's white where they overlap. So intersect only keeps the parts where the shapes are touching. So if I click that, I keep that. This is a really nice way to make eyes. If I were to rotate that, you would see a pretty good eye shape, a lemon wedge. And then there is exclude, which only takes out where they overlap. So if I do this, I'll end up with a hole in between them. So I can do the same thing with the shape builder. It's just a little more manual where I could hold Option and exclude, or I could hold Option and remove those. So in some ways, the Pathfinder can be quicker. It can save you several clicks. All right. Let's make some shapes. You'll see it really come to life when we make some of these. Does everybody have a document? Option or Alt? Alt is the equivalent on Windows. Thank you for asking that, Cheryl, because I forget. So if I say Command, it's Control on Windows. If I say Option, it's Alt on Windows. All right. Ideally, it would probably be a nice idea to turn your grid on and be consistent with your sizing so that they all have similar widths and heights and thickness. But the grid makes it a little hard to follow along for this case, so I'm going to do it without it. But if you ever want to turn your grid on, you press Command or Control and apostrophe. And this will help you be pretty consistent. But I think I go a little cross-eyed looking at it. All right, we're going to start easy and then go a little more complex. To make a magnifying glass, we're just going to combine two shapes. And we're also going to use some transform tools, which you'll find is better than guessing. So I'm going to use my ellipse tool, which is L on the keyboard. Hold Shift and draw a circle. And then instead of drawing another circle and trying to center it and put it on top, we're going to right-click, transform, and scale. Scale is the term for resize. And I'm just going to make it, I'm going to do a uniform scale, and I'm going to make it 70% smaller. You can kind of preview how much smaller it's getting. And I'm going to copy it. If I click OK, it's going to make my original smaller. If I click copy, it's going to make a new version of it that is 70% smaller. And then I'm going to grab my selection tool, select both of them, grab the shape builder, and Alt or Option click in the center. Now we need to add a handle to this. And I'll repeat any steps that you like. I'm going to switch to the rectangle tool, which is M on the keyboard. And I'm going to click inside the circle so I make it the same width. And I'm going to make a rectangle. It doesn't really matter how long you make it. So just try and make it the same width. And then I'm going to right click again, transform, and I'm going to rotate. You could just use the selection tool and hold Shift. I just think if we get to know these transform tools a little bit, you'll see how you can actually use them to repeat steps. I'm going to rotate 45 degrees. And it doesn't show you your preview until you hit Tab. That's pretty good. Yes, and please ask us to repeat anything. And then I'm going to click OK. I'll grab my selection tool and pull it about where I want it. I'm not worried about where it overlaps a little bit because now I'm going to select both of them with the selection tool. So I switched over to the selection tool and just did a click and drag. And now I'm going to grab the shape builder. And I'm just going to click and drag along here into the handle. And that red outline describes the new shape that I am making. Okay, I'll do the delete the circle in the middle again in a second. With the shape builder tool, you just hold Option and click on the middle circle. But you have to make sure that you have both the circles selected. So I drew a circle, right click, transform, scale. I made it 70% and I clicked copy. Then I grabbed my selection tool, selected both of them, and I grabbed the shape builder, held Option or Alt, and clicked in the middle. And while we're at it, I drew a rectangle, made it the same width as my circle, and I right-clicked, transform, rotate, 45 degrees, okay. Switch to the selection tool, moved it where I want it, selected both, grabbed the shape builder, clicked and dragged along the circle and the handle, Option clicked on the excess piece. You're very welcome. So we have a magnifying glass, and if you didn't quite get how we built some of it, we'll see it again on the new document. So let's just move this off of our artboard here, because we're going to do something for those in a little bit. So if we look at this new document, it looks like a rectangle with a square used to take a piece out of it, and then a little triangle. So let's go ahead and make that. I'm going to switch to my rectangle tool. I'm going to press M, and I'm going to draw that shape. Pretty good. Then I'm going to draw a square. So I'm going to hold Shift while I draw this rectangle. And then I'm going to move it to what I think is a good spot to cut it off. This would be a good part for the grid to come into place. But we're just going to do it. We're going to eyeball it today, which is not the best way, but that's okay. All right, so with my selection tool, I'm going to select both of them. And we're going to keep using the shape builder so that we get comfortable with it. I'm going to grab the shape builder tool, and I'm going to hold Option to delete this, Option or Alt, and this. How do I want to do the last part? Actually trying to remember how I did this. All right. So now I'm going to draw another rectangle, a square that fits exactly in here. Ooh, I didn't do a very good job with my square. That's okay. Let's just do one that's a little bit smaller. All right, you know what? Yeah, that's okay. We'll do it that way anyway. Sorry, guys. We'll draw a rectangle inside here, not a square. We'll make it the same size. And then we're going to just remove this corner to turn it into a triangle. We could use a triangle tool, but this is the way I saw how to do it. So if you grab the pen tool, you'll click and remove this corner. And then you can move it out and shrink it to fit, which is not the quickest way, but that's how we'll do it today. So again, with the rectangle I drew, I just grabbed the pen tool. And with the pen tool, when you have a shape selected, if you click on an anchor point, that's this little guy here, it will delete it. And that will turn it into a new shape. Okay. Let's make the heart. We're going to move this shape over, but right now this is two separate shapes. So we're going to group it so that it moves all together, whether we click on both or one. And you do that by right-clicking Group or Command or Control G. Zoom out, move it over here. Okay, the hearts are pretty quick. When you kind of visualize it, you think, oh, am I going to draw a couple circles and then a triangle, or what am I going to do? But for the heart, it's actually just two rounded rectangles that we rotate. So let's draw another rectangle. I'm going to press M and click and drag. And then I don't have to switch tools. If you look at my rectangle, there's these little dots right inside the corners. That's how you round the corners on any shape that you have drawn. So it's a really nice tool. And you just click and pull it in. We're going to pull it in all the way. Everybody have a kind of pill shape now? This is kind of a classic button style right now on the web. All right, we're going to right click, transform, and rotate 45 degrees and click OK. And then we're going to right click, transform, rotate, and I think we do -45. Oh no. Hold on, let's undo that rotate. So we're going to make a copy of it. So right click, sorry about that, transform, rotate 45 and copy it because we want to leave the parallel one just to make life easier. So copy, and then we'll click on the back one, right click, transform, rotate, and we'll do -45 degrees. Can anybody see the heart already? If we click OK now. So if you see the overlap here, we can see we have two ways we can make an upside down heart or a right side up heart. So now, again, this is actually a case where the Pathfinder wouldn't actually work well for me, but the Shapebuilder would work really well. So I grabbed the selection tool and clicked and dragged to select both. And then I'm going to grab Shapebuilder and I'm going to click and drag on the 3 pieces I want to keep. And then I'm going to hold Option or Alt and click on these 2 pieces I don't want. And now I've made a like icon. I'm going to make it fill my rectangle here. And we'll toss this one aside as well. Does anybody want to see any of those steps again? Because I did muck one up a little bit, so. All right, let's keep going because we're going to see repetition of these tools anyway. Let's make our send an email one. I'm going to do this one a little faster because it's a few things we've seen. So I'll make a rectangle and then I'll make a smaller rectangle. And I will right click, transform, rotate. And I think I want to do 30 degrees, looks about right. And I will copy it. And then the other one, I will right click, transform, rotate, -30. And I'll just move them. Let's put a little, let's change their color so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to make them yellow. Okay. And then we'll put them here. I'm just going to line the edges up. And it looks like I didn't make them big enough. So I'm just going to drag this out. And I'm going to drag this out as well. If it lets me. There we go. All right. So I can tell that they overlap enough. So this is going to be a little different steps. First, I'm going to combine these 2 into the shape that I want. So I'm only going to select the 2 envelope lines. So I'm going to hold Shift. I did not select the blue rectangle. I'm going to grab my Shapebuilder and I'm going to click and drag along these parts and hold Option to remove these. Otherwise, I'll have too many shapes to cut out from the rectangle. And then I'm going to grab the selection tool and select everything. And I didn't do a good job aligning it. So, well, let's select both and use our align tool here. Move it up a little bit. Okay, I was a little careless with my alignment, but that's okay. I'll select both the shapes, go back to my Shapebuilder, and I will hold Option on all of the yellow. And then I'm going to group them together, right click, group, or Command or Control G. We're doing on time. Okay, so what I think we'll do is do just one more. Would anybody like to see any of the steps to make these again? We're going to make the gear, and then we're going to move on to something a little more colorful, if you will. And if you decide you have a question later, that's fine too. Okay, so if we look at this, you can see it's made up of 5 rectangles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think, long skinny rectangles, 2 circles. So that's kind of what you want to start thinking when you look at these shapes. So let's go ahead and start by drawing a circle. And for this one, we're going to use the Pathfinder because we're going to have a bunch of elements. So we're going to draw a perfect circle. I held L and switched to the ellipse. And let's go ahead and use our align tools over here. I'm going to horizontal and vertical align. And then I'm actually going to cut the center out last because what I want to do is make one solid shape and then cut it out. It saves you a bunch of steps. So now we're going to do our rectangle tool, and we're going to draw our first tooth, I guess is what we would call these. And I really want to make sure it's centered within that shape. So I'm going to select both of them, go over to these alignment tools and choose horizontal and vertical. So now they're aligned to each other, because what I'm going to do is rotate and repeat this tooth part. So I think we'll do 30-degree rotations. We're going to right click, transform, rotate, and -30 is good. And what's fun about this is when I click copy, I have a new option that I can use instead of right click, transform, rotate, copy. I can do all of that with one keyboard shortcut, which is transform, transform again, which is Command or Control D. So now we'll press Command or Control D 4 times. And we have created almost our gear. And some of it, you know, like these little things, imagine how much time people spend trying to rotate them by hand and get them all perfectly. It just took us a few seconds. Now, if I select all of these, you'll see that the shape builder could actually let you do some pretty cool stuff. Let's just see this for fun. If I hold Option and go around the center, I end up with almost like a snowflake pattern, right? That's not what we're trying to do. And if I were trying to combine all of these, I would kind of have to go like this and get every little intersect, which is why in this case, it saves us a lot of time to just use the Pathfinder Unite. So I'll just click that once, and now this is one shape. If I had made my donut first and then done all the intersects, and then I united them, I would have ended up with those cross sections on them. So now all I do is grab my ellipse tool, hold Shift, draw my perfect circle. And before I minus front, I'm going to switch to my selection tool, select both, and I'm going to center them again. Otherwise, it's off center. And now I can do minus front, or if you prefer the shape builder, you could grab your shape builder and option click, Alt or Option. And we have a cog. I like this mint color I used. Okay, what do we think? Do we want to see any of these again? Any steps that we want repeated? Because we're going to do something slightly different now. And we can always revisit at the end during questions. So no problem if you don't have questions now. Yeah, great. So at the end, if you want to know how to do the pencil, or I think you can imagine how to do the arrow, we can revisit those too. I just want to make sure we have time for everything. So what we're going to do now is draw a little Instagram story highlight. And you can see I have a little leftover. And there's going to be some tools that we use, and there's going to be some new ideas here too. So I'm going to try and go nice and slow, but this is kind of a more elaborate idea of what an icon is instead of just a purely functional one. This is an aesthetic that goes with your online presence. Okay, so what we're going to do is make a little succulent in a pot. And if you ever want to revisit this, this is based on a really nice video by an Adobe creator called Claddy. I think she has a great accent. And that's on the resource page as well. So we are going to start with a rectangle. And let's go ahead and set the fill. We'll choose that kind of middle orange here. Okay. And what we're going to do is bring the corners in to create that. Is that a trapezoid? Yeah, it's not a parallelogram. So we're going to use not the selection tool, but the direct selection tool, which is A on the keyboard. And you want to click on just the bottom left corner. And if you want to bring them in the same amount, instead of trying to click and drag and hold shift or anything, you can click on that corner and you can use your arrow keys. But what's nice is you can hold shift and it'll move it 10 pixels at a time. So let's say we move it in 6 times while holding shift. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe a little more, 8, maybe like 10 times. And I didn't count, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh no, okay. So we should all have hopefully a even parallel or trapezoid. I don't think mine is. I'm going to scooch this out a second. Okay. It's okay if it's not. It's supposed to look a little freehand for this particular one. Now what we're going to do is split this in the middle and point them down as well. So let's start. Well, let's do it with the pen tool. So if you grab the pen tool now, P on the keyboard. By the way, if you ever notice that your cursor is just an X like this is because caps lock is on. So that's why mine was missing. And you should have a smart guide that kind of goes along with the intersect here. And if you have this shape selected, you're just going to add a point simply by clicking in the top middle and clicking in the bottom middle. And now we're going to point it down to give it that, it's going to be shaped kind of like a badge, but it's also going to become our depth. So I'm going to go back to the direct selection tool. And instead of clicking just one point, I'm going to click and drag to select both of these points. And I'm going to hold shift and arrow down a bunch of times. I think like 10 times. And you can kind of see how we have part of a cube now. All right, so now what we're going to do is split these in half because I want one to be the highlight side and the other to be the shadow side. We're going to use a tool called the segment tool. The keyboard shortcut is backslash, but it's also right here next to the type tool. And again, using your guide, you're going to click and draw a line that goes down the middle and beyond it. You want to make sure it goes outside of both sides. Yeah, Zach, it really is crazy how you learn to kind of visualize these shapes a different way, and then you can create a three-dimensional box in what feels like something that's almost too simple. All right, let's split these puppies in half. This is going to be a revisit. We're going to grab our selection tool, click and drag to select the segment and the shape. And now what we're going to do is with the shape builder, and we couldn't really do this with Pathfinder, we're just going to click on each half. And those are two separate shapes now. And we do have this leftover segment. We're going to hold Option or Alt, click and drag across that to get rid of it. All right, let's do that one more time. So somebody asked, what was the tool to make the line and split? It's called the segment tool, line segment tool, which is just this little, looks like a / even though the keyboard shortcut is \. So we'll click on that and we'll draw an intersect right down the middle. You should have a nice purple line that sticks to it and keeps it straight and in the middle. Then we'll grab the selection tool, click and drag to select both. Grab the shape builder, click on each half, hold Option or Alt and click over the leftover line. And let's go ahead and fill this with that middle orange again. Oh, looks like we can't, never mind. Okay, so the reason I wanted to fill them is because they can be kind of difficult to select after the point, but let's go ahead and grab our selection tool. I guess I could do it now, but that's okay. Let's click off of them. And if you kind of hover around, you'll see that they exist, but they have no fill and no stroke. So I'm just going to click and drag on this half to select this part, and we will make that the darker orange. And I'm going to click and drag on this part, and we will fill that with the lighter orange. How are we feeling? Can I keep going? We're going to draw some leaves now. And this is kind of tough if you're on a trackpad, so don't feel bad if they come out like noodles. Oh, okay, let me do the split one more time. So we have, it does. All right, we have our rectangle. We used the pen tool and we added points in the center, top and bottom. And then I used my direct selection tool, A on the keyboard, selected both, move them down. Oh yeah, and I needed to move these in too. 1, 2, 3. Hopefully you have this already. And then we want to split it in half. The tool for that is right here, line segment. And you're just going to click and drag straight down the middle. You should have a nice purple guide that takes you there. And then you're going to grab the selection tool, click and drag to select both the segment you drew and the shape. I don't know what to call that shape. And then you're going to use the shape builder tool, which is Shift M on the keyboard. All you do, you don't hold anything on the keyboard. You just click on each side to turn those into shapes. And then you hold Option and click and drag over the lines, or Alt to delete those parts. Like the shape builder is like a blender, eraser, and knife tool in one. Excellent. I'm glad you got it. And then you just click and drag, select each piece, make one a dark orange, click and drag, make the other a light orange. Okay, pretty cool. It's also like a common badge. What is that? It looks like Transformers or something. Where am I going? All right, let's go back over here, Command plus, and we're going to draw 3 leaves by hands. It is a chevron. Yeah, that's true. Thank you, Cindy. So we're going to draw 3 leaves by hand using the pencil tool. The keyboard shortcut on the pencil is N. You can go ahead and hit that to activate it. But I also want you to take a second to double click on the tool and make sure the fidelity is set to smooth. This means that instead of trying to accurately draw exactly what you draw, it's going to remove your jiggles and inconsistencies and try and create smooth shapes. So I double clicked on the pencil and made sure that smooth is set to all the way. Fidelity is set all the way to smooth. All right, and then we're just going to draw 3 leaf shapes here. Oh, make sure you close your shape. So, I mean, it's not a big deal, but it's better if you close it at the end. Oh my goodness. There we go, that's fine. And it doesn't really matter what the bottom of your leaf looks like because it's going to be hidden by the vase anyway. That's perfectly fine. So again, I just drew 3 leaves here. And I'll do it one more time. I used the pencil and I drew a leaf, and you can see that it takes what I drew, even though it's pretty shaky, and it turns it into a really smooth lined, almost teardrop. All right, I'm going to grab my selection tool, select all 3, and I'm going to make them green, whatever green you like. There's a green. And what's nice about this is if I'm unhappy with where I drew it or the size or the rotation, with my direct selection tool, I can grab it, move it around. I can rotate it. I can make it smaller or bigger. I could even go in with the direct selection tool and change the angles of the vector. We're not going to go there yet. But does everybody have 3 green potatoes, if you will? I think we do. All right, this next part is going to be, we're going to switch back and forth between 2 tools 3 times. So the first thing we'll do is select the first leaf, and then we're going to use what's called the knife tool. And what the knife does is if you have a shape selected and you click and drag across it, it splits that shape, kind of like what we did with the segment tool, except it's a little more freehand. And we're going to turn these each into 2 little shapes that have a spot for a highlight. So the knife tool is hiding under your eraser, which is right next to the pencil. So if you click and hold on the eraser, you go down to your knife. And what you want to do is make sure you cut through the tip, come in a little bit, and then come back out. You don't need to make a full shape. As long as you have an entry and exit point, you now have a shape that has actually been split into 2. So if I grab my selection tool, click off it and back on, I can select this part. And I can make it a lighter green. So now I'm going to go and click the next leaf, grab my knife tool, and I'm going to, well, I'm going to switch these colors because I drew my highlights on the left side. So I'll fix that in a second. I'm going to click and drag from the point, come out, and then I'm going to grab my selection tool, click on the next one, grab the knife, click and drag through the top point, and then come back out. So now if I grab my selection tool, I should have these parts that I can make a lighter green. And what I was talking about is this doesn't make sense that these leaves have these little highlights on the left, but the pot has a highlight on the right. So let's switch that. Hopefully you guys were just smarter than me and did it right the first time. How are we doing? We're almost at the end here. I want to get to image trace. So what we're going to do now is select all of these by clicking and dragging. And we're going to move them to the back by pressing, which one is it? It's going to be Command or Control, Shift, and then you're going to hit the left bracket, which is right next to the letter P. And looks like I've got some leftover bits I need to go and delete here. So I'm just going to click on them and delete them. So again, I selected all of them and I hit Command or Control Shift and left bracket. Right bracket brings it to the front, left bracket sends it to the back. We've got 2 more steps and then we're done. We need to fill in the back of our pot here. So I'm going to grab the pen tool. I'm going to start at this corner, come out to the middle, go to the other corner, and come out to the front. And then back to my very first corner. Doesn't really matter how perfect this shape is because we're going to move it to the back anyway. All right, let's change the fill to gray. And again, Control, Command, Shift, left bracket. And there it is going through there. And then we just need to put a circle behind it with the ellipse, hold Shift, and put it there. And again, send it to the back, Command, Control, Shift, left bracket. And there I have my Instagram highlight, although this is not a good color for the circle. I'm going to make it a blue because that was the same color as the fill for the pot. Okay, and then we'll group it, Command or Control G or right click. And I'm just going to show you, ooh, did I not group those? Let me select them all and group them. I'm going to show you how to save these all pretty quickly in one go. And then Brian's going to jump in and talk about image trace. So if you select the Artboard tool, which is Shift O, and it's down here almost to the bottom above the hand tool, and you just click on each icon that you drew, it's going to drop a little artboard behind it, and it's going to let us use this nice export option. So I used the Artboard tool and just clicked on each icon that I drew. Now I'll go File, Export, Export for Screens. And you can see you can select your artboards here. And what you want to do is just double check. 1x will save them at their original size, 2x twice their size, and so forth. These are all vectors. We can make them as big or small as we like. But we want to make sure we have the transparent background turned on. So if I hit this little gear here, I want to make sure background color is transparent. And then we save. Yes. Let's do it one more time. So all I did was grab my Artboard tool, which is right here, and I just click on each one. And what it does is it makes an artboard that's the same size as the shape. Absolutely. So then we went File, Export, Export for Screens. We're going to make sure that transparency is turned on. And then we're going to choose where they're going to save. I'll make a folder on my desktop. Icons with a Z. And then you click Export. And if we go look, I have a folder called Icons. And I have all of my icons here ready to be used. And what I want to do now is toss it over to Brian and give him at least half an hour for image tracing. Maybe he doesn't need all that. That's fine, because then we'll have time for questions as well. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Fantastic. Yeah, this should not take the whole hour. I think we can get, we'll view this as bonus time, and I'll just show you guys how image tracing works and how it can be useful to help you in your designs. So let's go ahead and share our screen here. And for those of you playing along at home, I believe there is a tracing.ai file that you can open up inside of your support documentation. This is an awesome tracing file provided by Adobe here for us to kind of walk through what image tracing looks like. So what image tracing is what it sounds like. We're going to be basically tracing the lines in this image and then converting those lines into vector shapes that we can use and scale up and scale down. The reason why we might want to do that is if we needed to take, because this is just a JPEG here, and if I zoom in, we can see the individual pixels. You can bring in JPEGs into Illustrator really easily. You can click and drag, or you can right click, open in Illustrator. So what we want to do is we want to create a vector shape out of this section of pixels here. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we're going to do, the idea is we want to kind of use it as kind of like a logo for this happy birthday card. I'm choosing Option to zoom in and out. Also use your trackpad if you wish. Cool. Let's make this a little whiter here. Maybe. I will just do this. Perfect. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and click on this JPEG over here. Let me move the chat over here. And then with this guy selected on the right-hand side in your properties, you'll find quick actions. Under quick actions, you'll find all sorts of things. This is where you found your Pathfinder tools when you were working with shapes. But with the JPEG selected, we will have this option called Image Trace. Once we click on Image Trace, it'll ask us for the type of image trace that we want. I'm going to go ahead and we'll start with low fidelity photo here. What it's going to do is that your computer will kind of interpolate it here. And then here's a preview of what this will look like in low fidelity here. And then if we can go with high fidelity too. You'd think you want to do that all the time, but not necessarily. It depends on what your goal is for the image. There's a lot of extra stuff here, and I just really want this as a logo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and choose 16 colors. Not working for me. Let's go sketched art. Cool. That works way better. Because really what I want is this shape right here. You have to think about what you want. This has a lot of extra stuff like the back of the table or the ground that was over here previously. So if I didn't want, so if I didn't want any of those, you could always take your JPEG and then crop it before you ever come here. So you just have the part you want to work with, which is great. I'm going to go into a sketch art though. And then I need to hit expand in order to turn these into vector shapes that I can move and edit. So I'm going to hit expand here. Actually, yeah, there we go. Cool. We'll get into that menu in just a second. We're going to hit expand. And now that they're expanded, I have all of these different things as vector shapes. I can click on each individual piece. These are automatically grouped together. So if you want to drill down and select individual elements, you will need to double click. That will kind of drill you into this section right here. And then we can kind of select the areas we want. We can kind of click and drag to select just this little robot guy. If I missed a piece here and I want to add more, I can hold down the shift key and then click on the area that I want to add. And it will add it to that selection. So I have all of this. And then what I want to do using the quick actions menu, just to make it easier to manipulate, I want to group this together. That just creates the group within a group there. And then I can quickly copy this. And that's Command C on Mac, Control C on Windows, just like a word processor. You may have noticed that when you double click to get into this group, everything else gets a little bit more transparent. You'll see right here at the top left-hand side that I'm inside of a group. To work on it. I can just double click anywhere outside of there. And that will take me back to my normal set. And I can come over here and then Command or Control V to paste, move this over here, and then scale it down. Cool thing about this being a vector shape now is let's say that I'm just scaling this down, holding, grabbing an edge since it's grouped together, holding down shift, clicking and dragging. And then the cool thing about it being a vector shape here is that I can fill it with a different color if I want, which is nice. So red doesn't really work. Maybe white will. Perfect. And then I've got kind of my birthday card thing. I can come in and make changes to it. Since it's grouped together, they'll kind of move individually. But if for whatever reason I wanted to make a change here, I'd simply double click to get into this targeted mode. Then I can kind of move individual pieces. And then I just click away to click out of it. I have all of these same options that I had previously with any other shape that I have, and click away. And there we go. So that's a really quick image trace. Let me see here. Looks like I have something in chat. Let's see. Awesome. Thanks for the additional stuff. There. Cool. So image trace makes sense. Cool. All right. I'll show you a few other examples of how we can kind of get a little bit deeper with it. Let's say that we needed to grab a logo and all we had was a JPEG. there are definitely better versions of things like this guy here. So check with your, if you work at a college, check with your marketing departments for assets and things like that. They can give you high quality stuff, but we're going to work under the assumption that this is an old logo and maybe I don't have access to it. So how do I create a logo? So how can I start creating that logo real quick? We're going to go ahead and grab this Angry Wilbur here. I'm going to right click it. I'm going to open an Illustrator. Cool. When we look at it here, it looks pretty good, right? But as we zoom in, we have these pixels right here. Now, if we wanted to take this, and again, let's assume that this is a logo that we can't recreate. We don't have access to that type of stuff. This is for educational purposes. Please check with your branding and marketing departments for official logos and things like that. They would love to help you. You do not need to do this for this type of scenario, but should you be in a case where you're working for a friend or trying to do something for yourself, and you have it, this is what you do. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. I'm going to image trace. And then if I go with high fidelity photo, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense here because the colors are really simple. So think about the end result. So for here, probably like a 6 color is going to be enough. And then once you do this, it's going to say, hey, this is a really big image. Would you like to continue or do you want to rasterize it first? So rasterizing it would be Illustrator's attempt to make it smaller. You can just, with your object selected, go to objects, and then where was it? Rasterize. Cool. And then I'm just going to choose RGB is fine. And then 72 PPI is great. It's probably going to give me the same warning again. That's okay. I'm going to image trace with 6 colors. And then this is what the preview looks like. Doesn't look a whole lot different, but when I zoom in, you see how crisp those lines are now? But we did lose some fidelity here in this A. We could try and grab that back by coming under this little tab here next to image trace. Then you get this little pop-up menu where we can either try and increase the number of paths. And the more we increase that, the more complex our geometry is going to get. And there is a point of diminishing returns, as you see right here. I tend to say less geometry is better. We can increase or decrease the corners here. We can also choose the methods that we want this to do. And we can also do things like ignore white and snap curves to lines. There are also tons of presets here that can help you, but just so that you know, there are sliders there for you. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it down a little bit. We're going to say that's okay for our intents and purposes. What is the benefit of rasterizing it first? If you have a really large image, rasterizing it will allow Illustrator to attempt to create a smaller version of that image that will make it faster to trace. Great question. All right, so we're going to hit expand here. And then we have our vector shape here. Then we can come in, and then this has a gray line around it. I can kind of isolate that gray line if I click it right. You can also hit escape to kind of get out of things. So let's see, we have this kind of gray line right here. So we can take this and kind of remove it. And then we just have him by himself, and then we can do kind of what we want with him. He'll sit great on top of backgrounds of all sorts of different colors and things like that. But again, just wanted to let you know how that works. Cool. Any questions so far? I think I answered the one about the benefit of rasterizing. It makes it easier for your computer to process it. Some of these guys get really chunky. The other image that you all have is you have this effects pedal that I have for the guitars that I play. And I want to kind of grab this Maxon logo or this overdrive element right here. So this is another kind of great example of maybe I need this for something else, but I don't have the actual thing. Again, you should always try and investigate the actual thing. But if you don't have it, this is a great way to kind of recreate a logo. So we're going to go ahead and open with Illustrator. Cool. And you'll see this is really big. It's going to take a while to kind of cook, which is why we might want to rasterize it or cut it up first. I'm going to go ahead and just show you worst case scenario. So we're going to work with this. So, and our goal is to kind of grab this Maxon logo here. So dropping down this thing, selecting it, then going to image trace. We're going to go with, we can go with something like high or low fidelity photo, but what I really care about is this Maxon thing here. So like I will ignore the other things. I'm just going to go with like a 6 color. It's gonna say, hey, this is gonna take a while, and you'll see, keeping the file big on purpose. We're just gonna let that cook. And you'll see it takes some time. So the more isolated you can get the thing that you want to remove, that's great. But it's also a really cool thing to do with images that you have. If you just wanted to kind of give them like a kind of a little bit of a more wild or scaled out look. Like if this is what you're going for, it's kind of cool. It looks kind of vintage. And you'll see that all of these guys are different vector shapes. I can come in here, and if I zoom in on Maxon, because that's what I'm after, it says Adobe can't understand the file. What did I share with y'all? Pretty sure I shared a JPEG. Was it a JPEG that I shared, or was it an HEIC?
Looks like it's a PNG. Open with. Plugin.
Well, for funsies, I'll share the one that I'm using in the chat for this specific thing. If y'all want to try it. Cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it looks like
it's a different file. Sorry about that.
It says it's .png, but I think maybe it's not.
Yeah, it might not be. This is a JPEG, I promise. So anyway, you could use whatever image you wanted. But I'm just gonna zoom in here and make sure that I like how that Maxon looks, and I kind of do. No real kind of things to manipulate here, but if I wanted to, this is a place like where lowering my paths might be nice. And you'll kind of see how, and again, like this is a heavy file, so it takes a moment. But if I lower my paths, maybe I'll lose a little bit of the jaggedy bits that are right here. Make this logo a little bit more usable once we're done. Cool. Give it a second. We'll see. I may have done nothing to benefit us. That's okay. So let's go with that. And then we will expand. Cool. So now we have a vector object. And again, this is all one big group. And my goal is to get here. So what I'll do is, again, like if I were doing this again and I were doing this more, I would definitely crop this out, but just going to show you can use it from an image here. I'm going to go ahead and double click to get inside of the group. And then I'm going to start selecting pieces here. I'm going to keep the shift key held down. I'm just going to click on every letter. I'm also going to click on the center of the A right there and in the center of the O. Cool. So I have this, and then all I'm going to do, there's tons of ways you can get over here. I just want to get it over here to a blank area so I can use it somewhere else. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click and drag to make a copy. Option on Mac. Then I have that. If you didn't grab these green parts, it's because you didn't select them when you were doing that. So just kind of show you what that looks like one more time. If I just selected each letter without the, double click to get in it. If I just selected each letter without the green parts, you'll see that, that one actually worked. Sometimes it doesn't. That's awesome. Sometimes you need to select these green bits as well, and then do then select the elements and then do a shape builder to kind of remove them. But I can kind of select these elements and delete them out. Cool. Then I have my logo here. It is kind of this cream color. I really want it to be white, real easy to do because it's a vector shape. You can select, and then we can come over here to our libraries and then find white wherever it may be. And then change it. So, but if I wanted it kind of that like overdrive pedals color green, I can do that as well. Select it, grab the eye tool, and then select that green, that gray, or even that white right there. Cool. And again, then we can kind of take this and then copy it and paste it, or export it out however we want. But that's essentially it there. Any questions on that? I did have one other example of why you might want to go with a lower amount of colors as opposed to something more high fidelity. It kind of depends on what you're going for. But what questions do we have about this here? It's all pretty simple. Pretty easy to do. There's awesome black and white stuff you can do with this image tracing too. It's a super powerful tool to allow you to take assets that you may already have, or if you're drawing like a logo on paper or something like that, it's a fantastic way to get started. Any questions that we have?